Okay, we are live now. Welcome everyone. I'm so grateful that you are all able to join us today. Before we get started, our Xpey Wellness team would like to begin by acknowledging and honoring the diverse Coast Salish nations that we work with and whose territory we reside in. That's including Hamalko, Clahoose, Qualicum, Snanawis, Snuneymuxw, Subosset, Xalath, Lyaxan, Penelakut, Cowichan tribes, Malahat, Chianu, Suk, Staminis, Esquimalt, Songhees, Sartlip, Sycum, Paquachin, and Sayout. Our team, the Xpey Wellness team, is a diverse group of people with roots and ancestries in different nations and cultures. And so we acknowledge that when we show up in this work and within these communities that we are showing up as guests. So with that being said, welcome back to Promoting Resiliency. This is a 9-part webinar series, and it's a collaboration between the Xpey Wellness team and the First Nations Health Authority Vancouver Island Respecting Tobacco program. And so we just want to quickly introduce the Xpey Wellness team. So the team is made up of Bianca Elliott. Bianca is she's the coordinator, she's the administrator for the Xpey Wellness team. Her ancestry is in Songhees and Esquimalt, and her education and career background is around sharing knowledge, sharing traditional knowledge of Indigenous foods and medicines through workshop-based learning. My name is Harley Macarthur. I am from White Bear First Nation in Southeast Saskatchewan. I am the coordinator for the North Island region, and my education is in addictions counseling, and I am very fortunate that I am the moderator and host for this resiliency webinar series. Marco Caffiero is the South Island coordinator. His ancestry is Anishinaabe from Rainy River First Nation and Chilean. He has over 19 years experience in martial arts, and he's a capoeira and boot camp fitness instructor. And who we're partnering with, Larissa Kosser. She is with First Nations Health Authority, the Respecting Tobacco program. She's a first-generation immigrant from Brazil, and her education is a Master's of Public Health and has a background in empowerment and health promotion and community development. She works at First Nations Health Authority and is honored to support First Nations culture and wellness on Vancouver Island, and he lives and works from the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. And so the theme of this whole series is grounding our health in Indigenous ways of self-care. And in the creation of this series, we wanted to focus on sharing Indigenous ways of supporting our well-being during this pandemic, but also beyond that. So today we are honored to be joined by Gerry Oleman and Robynne Edgar, and they are going to be sharing their knowledge of traditional medicines and herbs for lung health. And I will pass it over to them shortly to introduce themselves. But before that, I just did want to say that at the end of this presentation, we are giving away 2 prizes. And in these prize packs, it includes a water bottle, a self-care cedar cube, and a Love Your Lung tea, which was made by Robynne. And how we're going to give away these prizes is at the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer period. So save your questions till the end. And I will pick my favorite question, and Robynne or Gerry will pick their favorite question, and that's how we will award the prizes. Couple more things. So this is taking place on Zoom and Facebook Live. So if you are on Zoom, please remember to keep your mics muted. And we are going to leave questions for the end of the presentation. And so please type them in the chat function or leave them in the comments on Facebook, and we will make sure that Robynne and Gerry hear these. And secondly, this webinar, it is being recorded. So if you choose to ask questions, just know that it is recorded and live streamed on Facebook and is available for people to view after the live event is over. We did quickly just want to say that today we are joined by Bailey Morell. Bailey is a reporter from Indigenews, and we just wanted to extend our welcome to them and thank them for being here today. And then to just keep in mind, with any programming, we want to make sure that what we're doing is meaningful, it's what you want to see. So please, at the end, take a couple minutes to fill out our survey. We really want to hear any constructive feedback that you have, so please just keep that in mind. And that is all the rambling I have to do right now, so I will pass it over to Robyn and Gerry to introduce themselves and get started.
Elders first, Gerry.
Hello, my name is, where I'm from, I'm Statlium, and I carry my great-grandfather's name, Patsay. In Coast Salish territory, I'm known as Cider. But I'm coming to you from Brandon, Manitoba, the home of the Dakota, Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji, Cree, Métis peoples, and also Dene, Dene. I'm an elder, I'm a grandfather, great-grandfather, and of course a father, and a brother, and a nephew. And I have, I don't know how many cousins. I got a multitude of cousins. So that's me.
Thanks, and hi everybody. It's weird not to see people. This is my first live Zoom. My name's Robynne Edgar, and I'm Cree and Métis on my father's side, and I'm Japanese on my mother's side. I'm an herbalist, but more importantly, I'm a plant lover. I've been studying herbalism now in a formal way since 2013, and I'm so excited to just be able to share some of my teachings with you all today. I'm coming to you from Cowichan territory.
Thank you so much. We're again so happy that you both could join us. Robyn, you have a presentation, right? So you should be able to share your screen now.
Yeah, I think Gerry's going to start and then I'll go after him.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Cookstum Callop and Schnuknuk, Cookstum Callop, I hope I say this right, Xpey, you know, the wonderful group that has called us together today, you know, to share, to lay teachings at your feet. Just as Robyn and myself, teachings were laid at our feet about medicine. And I'm just so happy to be here today as part of this resiliency project. I looked up the word resilient, and it means that we have the ability to recover quickly when we're traumatized or hurt. And I really believe that as Indigenous people we are. But I'd just like to start off with this quickly. I'll sing a couple of verses of a song that I sing. It's a healing song. It's a healing song that comes from the hummingbird. And I was singing, the verse that I sang was Thanksgiving for Mother Earth. And that's where all of our medicines come from. One of the elders told me, in Mother Earth, there's medicine for every organ of our body, for our skin, for our eyes, for our heart, for our liver, for our lungs, for our pancreas, for everything. There's medicine. And the job of the herbalists or the healers is to find the right combination or the right medicine for that organ. You know, we come from a very healthy people. Before contact with Europeans, we were very sound in mind, body, and spirit. You know, we carried knowledge of medicines. For thousands of years, we're using these medicines. You know, there was medicine of your hurting, if you have pain, like the red willow. They'd use the red willow. And my grandmother knew a lot about medicines. And she'd get me to pick medicine for her. Like red willow bark, burdock, you know, and different medicines she'd get me to pick for her. So I'm very glad that this is happening. You know, that there are people have it in their mind to seek out the knowledge keepers and to share knowledge with whoever signed up for this. And then they could pass it on to their children. That's how I learned about medicines. You know, we'd be out hunting or walk, you know, picking berries or out on nature. And one of the elders would say, oh, there's that medicine for. And then you would know what the medicines are. Then of course it's your job to ask, well, how do we use it? You know, and this segment is about lungs. And I have a little story about my lungs. I was 27 years of age. And I developed this, you know, that lung sickness, you know, and you can hear the rattling in your lungs, like when you breathe. And my grandmother heard me. And she told me to take that plant to your sweat lodge. You know, it was the green leaves at the bottom of the mullein plant. And she says, you take those down to your sweat lodge and you put it on the rocks and you breathe in that smoke. Fill up your lungs. And I remember at that time, you know, like I've been assimilated like most people into, you know, mainstream culture, and didn't really, at that time, I was just starting to come back home to looking at our ways. So in my mind, I'm saying to my granny, oh, granny, you're superstitious. To think that if I breathe in smoke, it's going to help my lungs. But I loved my granny to bits, so I took those leaves and I went down and I breathed in that smoke. And of course, I'd cough. I'm starting to cough, you know, but I keep breathing it in. Then I go out and I go into the lake and I'd submerge myself 4 times. And I go back and I do it again. This cloud of smoke in the sweat lodge and I'm breathing it in. And the second time I go out and I lower myself into the lake, I start coughing again. And all of this stuff started coming out of my lungs. I'm spitting it out into the water. I'm just coughing. So I do that for the 4 rounds of the sweat. And I was coughing up the stuff. It seemed like an awful lot of stuff had lined my lungs. So I coughed it out. So I done that for 2 days in a row. I go down there and I would sleep. But it cleared my lungs. You know, it worked for me. And not until years later I thought about it and I said, oh my gosh, breathing in the smoke was a direct application to my lung. It brought it right to my lung where that sickness was. And help to clean it so my body can start to heal itself. You know, our people, it's just so amazing to me. I've often wondered after that, how do our people know which medicine is for what? And how do they even know that? And I found out years later that they go by color or by shape, or they watch the animals, or they go fasting. They go in isolation and they meditate looking for medicine. And because that mullein leaf, you look at the color of the mullein leaf, and it's got that same, it's the same color as when you cough up, when you have a lung infection. Yeah. And you cough up and it looks like a greenie. And that's the color of that leaf. So, because mullein is from Europe, but our healers could see the quality in that plant to help our lung. You know, so I'm just totally amazed at our own people and the knowledge we had about medicine. And my dream has been that we go back to that. You know, because the best medicine, of course, is prevention. That's where we build up our immune systems, you know, that we don't get into those problems. Like we don't abuse our bodies, for instance, with tobacco, because that'll hurt your lung. You know, I've lost loved ones to lung cancer. You know, I used to smoke cigarettes. You know, and at a bad point in my life, it was a pack and a half a day or something like that. And I was stressed out. I wasn't myself. And I was hurting myself. So I have a lodge now, and I burn mullein every time because of the damage I've done to my lungs over the years. And I need to keep it clean, keep my lungs clean. So these medicines, you know, you start to find out, and you start to, but you ask before you use it. You ask the people that have the knowledge, especially if you're on some other kind of medication, because some medicines do fight each other. So it's better to know, to be safe. There are many good medicines from the doctors, Canadian Society. Someone told me 75% of the knowledge about medicines come from North and South America that the world produces today. I'm very proud of that number when I heard it, that we had this vast knowledge of medicines for every organ of our body. You know, so of course, when we use medicine, you know, even harvesting it, going out to collect a medicine, the first thing is put yourself in the right frame of mind. And I was taught you talk to the plants when you're going to go pick the medicine. It's just like you're saying, hey, I'm coming. I'm coming to get you. I need help, or somebody, so-and-so needs help. And when you get there, when an elder that taught me picking medicines says you sing for the plant when you're picking. You know, and then the plant, because we know everything has a spirit as Indigenous people. So you sing when you're harvesting that medicine, and you talk to that medicine in your mind that, thank you. You know, I need you now, or my relatives need you. Then you harvest that medicine. So you're taking it with respect. That's one of the foundations of our way of life, was how respectful we were of all life forms, every life form, because we understood that we all need each other. The trees, the animals, the insects, the plants, everything, we need each other. So we treated all the medicines with the highest of respect, because it's, like they say, it's going to extend our life. You know, we're going to live longer because our immune system is going to be strengthened, or it's actually going to kill that virus that got into our body, or that sickness. So it's very important that we start to teach our children is young, really young. My granny says, you talk to the baby while it's in the mom. You tell that baby there's medicine for you out on Mother Earth. You can even start to name them. You know, and my belief is that we know anyway, it's in our DNA, that we know the medicines. And it's just that knowledge, we need to wake it up. And we need to start using it. Like I'm using a medicine now that Robynne gave me. It's called curcumin or ant in my language. It's these little seeds. And I take it for my throat, you know, and I also use rat root for my throat, and that's part of the lung system, you know, the part from here to here. So I use those medicines every day, you know, because I speak a lot, I talk to a lot of people, and I need to look after my voice and my throat and my lungs. And I love to sing, do like chant, do traditional music. So we are responsible for our own health. And the word health means to be sound in mind, body, and spirit. So we can do a lot of prevention to keep this strong. And we do that by taking medicine. Even if you're not sick, like I'm taking this seed now, I don't have an illness. But it's a prevention too. And it strengthens, you know, parts of my body. I asked my granny about that curcumin, or what we call ant. And she said, oh, it's an all-around medicine. You know, she didn't tell me what this specifically was for. Because my mother struggled with English. She didn't know how to explain it to me. And her grandson is a residential school survivor. So I didn't have exposure to the language. But I do now, I do my best. I got books and stuff on my own language, Tsal'alh language. And I look at it and I start to understand more every word that I learn, you know. So I'm just so glad, I'm really thankful again to this group of young ladies and a young man for doing what they're doing. You know, it's empowering. It means we're going to take back our power that we gave to Canadian society, or just ripped away from us. The language, the knowledge of the medicines, you know, our songs and music. But we have people that refuse to let that go. And those to me are our national treasures, Indigenous national treasures. The ones that continue to use the medicine, harvest it, learn about it, and share it with the people. Those are national treasures in my view, Indigenous national treasures, because they refused to let this slip by and to let the people know that we can harvest it, we can use it. Because in mainstream society now, people think you have to go to the doctor, then get the prescription. You know, which is, you know, I see the sense of that too. But it's also capitalism. It's about making money. You know, all the healers that I've seen in my life, they didn't ask for anything when they gave me the medicine. But in our culture, we know that we're to make their life complete, and more importantly, make our life complete. When someone gives you something, you remember it, then you give something back, either right away or years, even years down the road. One of my teachers said, when you give, it'll come back to you. And sometimes it's a big circle before it gets back to you, which means years from now it'll come back to you. But every good deed that you do will come back to you or your family. It's just like badness. You put out harsh words and they come back to you. So that's, you know, the medicines, like I said, by the color or the shape. I get red willow from my grandmother, and she'd have me break it up. And she would get me to boil it. The water would get like tea, color of tea. Then she'd make compresses where she had arthritis. I could put the towel in there and take it out, and then when her skin could stand it, she'd put it where her arthritis was. It was years later that I found out that it's got the same qualities as aspirin, you know, so it's a painkiller. But you think of red, it's about fire. When they talk about rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatoid means a river of fire. And arthritis is in every joint, and it gets inflamed. Just think of the word inflamed. That's redness. So that's why they look for colors and also for shapes, you know, to get to know what medicine. Like for the brain, you know, there's fungus that we use that you can burn or make tea out of. And I remember I got 2 fungus one day, and I put them together, and it looked like a brain. And it reaffirmed that what the healer told me is, yeah, we look for the shape or the color, or we go out and fast and meditate to find the right medicine. You know, so you can do this. But I want you, when you do it, I want you to be respectful and to be careful. If you, like there's medicines, I won't use it until I talk to someone like Robynne or somebody and say, you know, I need, there's this is wrong with me. I need medicine for it. Even though I might have heard it, I'll still talk to someone that's more knowledgeable than myself. The medicines that I use are mainly for the spirit, the spirit that holds our body together. You know, the physical ailments and things, I know things like red willow, that fungus, you know, the mullein. There's also another invasive species, Scottish broom, I think they call it on the West Coast. It's got those really stiff green with yellow flowers in it. It's good for the skin. A healer from Vancouver Island told me about it. He says, you pour boiling water over it, let it steep for a while, then you tap your skin with it. You clear up your skin. And I told a young lady that, and she done it. It worked. You know, so, yeah. So you don't be afraid of exploring this world, this amazing world we have that has medicines for every organ of our body and for our spirit. You don't be, you get curious about this. You know, there might come a day when there aren't drugstores anymore. The elders predicted that when in the 70s, when I went to, the elders called us together, that we must start learning our ways in Clackman, our way of life, so we can help each other and help ourselves. So that's why when I got called to this by Robynne to accompany her here today, I was so grateful, because the elders said we must start to encourage people to use our ways that were so effective for thousands of years. You know, before contact, we were very healthy. My great-grandfather, for instance, lived to 105 years of age. To achieve that, you must be very healthy. You know, he was a healthy man, hunted, fished, picked berries, all the food he got with his own hands. And then, of course, our mental state is so important to be positive. You know, so I like to use sweetgrass and lavender and juniper to keep myself positive. Because juniper medicine is, I was told, it's a magnet for negativity. And if we start getting negative with ourselves, with other people, our immune system weakens. And we can catch sicknesses easy. So you find the medicines also to help your willpower, your spirit, because that's what it actually is. Your spirit is your willpower. And your spirit is very strong. You want to live. You want to be here. Doesn't matter if COVID's here or how many mosquitoes are outside or how hot or cold it is, you still want to be here. You want to live, you want to participate in life, and you want to be successful, and you want to be kind. That's an Indigenous person that follows Indigenous ways. It's not our way to be angry all the time, or to be fearful or depressed. That's a reason why addictions is so strong, because people are looking for happiness. You know, and those addictions a lot of it leads to lung problems. You know, smoking or doing cocaine or any of those drugs, it's going to damage your lungs. You know, so we must find ways, because everything, like we're talking about lungs, but I'm talking about how we think, you know, what we do, and our spirit, because it all can lead to helping people clear their lung. With my son, he was in the hospital, the ICU, and they said that he had lymphoma or some kind of cancer, and there's a black mass in his lungs. So my friend and I went there, and I thought we're going to lose him. They had a social worker talk to me. Your son's in a really bad way, he's in a coma. But we used music and juniper. We'd have the juniper in our pocket, because you're not supposed to bring live plants into ICU. So we'd keep it in our pocket. We put our hand in our pocket and rub our hands on the juniper. Then we'd sing and go over my son's body from head to foot. We just do that for hours on end. We didn't have anything else to do, because the doctors aren't working on him 24/7. And after 4 or 5 days, I couldn't even remember the time, because I was so worried about my son. And I remember it was Easter, and we went back after we stayed there all the way through. But they done biopsies on my son. They couldn't get the results till after Easter. And we came back, and the nurse said, what did you guys do? And she left. Then the doctor comes in and said, that black mass is just rapidly shrinking in your son. We x-rayed his lungs. He said, I don't know what's going on, and he left. But there's also an elder. He asked me where I was going. I told him I'm going to Kamloops. My son's in ICU. He says, I'm going to start doing ceremony for you and your son. You guys do what you're going to do. So I believe it is a combination of the elder, me and my friend, working on my son. You know, so anyway, so that's my little contribution to this webinar. And I'm just so happy to be here and just so grateful. I got a warm feeling in my heart now because of this, because I'm a firm believer in our ways. So one of my favorite people in the world is Robynne Edgar. I told her she reminds me of my granny. My granny was always around medicine, and I know Robynne is too, so it's time for you to listen to Robynne. She knows more about body medicine than I do. So Robynne, take it away.
Thanks, Gerry. I'm just going to attempt to share my screen here. All right. Harley, give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Okay, awesome. Yay, I love it when technology works. Thank you so much, Gerry. Honestly, you put me at ease all of the time, and I love speaking with you. It's such an honor to be here with you today, and thank you so much for answering the call when I asked you to co-present with me. It's really an honor for me. And I learned a lot of things today. I didn't know that about Scottish broom, so one reason to like Scottish broom, I guess. So what I'm going to talk about today I've chosen 6 plants, some of my favorite plants to support your lung health, and also some of the really easy and pleasant ways to get that medicine into your system. So we'll talk about herbal teas and herbal steams, and then some culinary uses, some really great immune system and respiratory medicines that you'll find in your own kitchen. But first, I just want to acknowledge Gerry again. Gerry, you've taught me more than you know. Gerry calls himself a change agent, and that couldn't be more true. And I've also had the honor to learn under herbalists Jesse Delman and Elise Krohn. And last but not least, of course, Dr. Nancy Turner, who's just an incredible human being and extremely knowledgeable on ethnobotany and plants for medicine and food in Indigenous communities. So needless to say, I've been super lucky from some of the mentors that I've had the pleasure to learn from. Ooh, so, okay, I'm gonna try and cut this down to 20 to 30 minutes. I could talk about plants forever. Glad to have a captive audience. But again, I chose 6 plants to talk about today for the respiratory system. And it was important for me that these plants would be really accessible to you. So not just something that, or I guess something that grows in your own backyard literally, but something that you can go out and harvest on your own if you like. And if you're not going to harvest it on your own, something that is at least accessible in herbal stores down the road from you or even online. But many of these plants that I'll talk about today are actually available still. They're still growing and fresh out there. Also, something I want to note is these plants have many herbal actions, and what I will just limit it today is talking about their actions on our respiratory system. So this plant here in front of you is goldenrod, and it's a native plant, and that just means it wasn't introduced, and it just naturally evolves in the region where we live. Many of you have probably seen this plant. It grows along the roadsides, ditches, as most of these medicinal herbs do. A lot of people will refer to them as weeds, but you know, I love them all. This plant looks like little golden torches, and it seems so out of place where it grows because it really just lightens up any area where it grows. And the main use for this is it's an anti-inflammatory. It's super anti-inflammatory to your respiratory tract, where there's especially a buildup of mucus. And it really helps to calm down the inflammation in your throat and your lungs and allows you to expel that mucus. That's what anti-catarrhal means. It's kind of a fancy word for that in herbal terms. So I fought the bees yesterday, because this is an online presentation and you guys can see pictures and that's great, but I really wanted to, because I know where there's a patch of this down the road, I really wanted you guys to see it in the flesh. So this, I can't make my screen big right now because I'm worried I'm going to lose my technology, but this is goldenrod just before it goes to flower. Or just before it gets, I guess, perfect to harvest. And this is goldenrod when it's really perfect to harvest. And you can see it's just a vibrant, bright yellow, and it's so pretty. And then the leaves are pretty unique as well. So the parts used for this plant are the leaves and the flowers, and it's dried. One of my favorite ingredients in my Love Your Lungs tea blend that we'll draw for later. And it's super spicy in flavor and a little bit lemony, so it's a really nice accompaniment in a tea blend. The next plant I want to talk about, it's also a native plant, but it grows everywhere, literally, ditches, gardens, lawns, you name it, and it's really available from, I would say, anywhere in late June, July, and it's still flowering and available for medicine now. I don't even know where to begin with this plant because there's so many uses for it. It's super broad spectrum, but for the purposes of this presentation, you know, it's a very high, it's a high antibacterial, so it will fight against infections. It will reduce fever, and it's also an anti-inflammatory. But the medicine is so strong, it's something that, unless you were super acute, I wouldn't use on its own. I would use as part of another medicine or in combination with, like Gerry was referring to earlier. Another thing Gerry was referring to is when he said, how did they know? You know, and that is just years and years of traditional wisdom and knowledge. Another fancy way of saying that herbalists like to refer to, it's called the doctrine of signatures that a plant will have. And really what that is, it's the physical appearance that a plant possesses that resemble the parts of the body that it's used for. So when we're talking about yarrow, the flowers, when you look at them really closely, look like coagulating blood. And externally, it's an unbelievable anticoagulant. I can speak to that, unfortunately, from experience. But the medicine of yarrow is, like I mentioned, super strong. And if you ever come across it, I encourage you to stop and have a little visit. I've got some more here. It's growing in my garden. This one, it's actually I think it's a hybrid version, and it's kind of pink. So a lot of you may see that just on the roadsides. I mean, it's so gorgeous. And then here is they're all medicinal, but if you want the native one that hasn't been cultivated, I would highly recommend the white version. And you can get a nice view of it there. And the one thing that differentiates the yarrow from other plants are the leaves, and they're very, very feathery. It's probably not the best example right now. But when I talk about yarrow, I also like to talk about its lookalikes, because it is a plant that has several, and one of them is extremely toxic. The others aren't, but some of them are sacred and others are just very different medicine. So if you look on the top right, that's Queen Anne's lace. And I think everybody knows Queen Anne's lace. And it's also a plant that's currently out there right now. And a very cool thing about this plant, and you can see it's quite similar, but they say that when Queen Anne was sewing her lace together, she pricked her finger and a little drop of blood fell on the lace. And if you look up closely, you'll see this tiny little red flower in there. And most of the flowers have it, but not all. So that's a really good indicator for this plant. But again, the leaves are super different than yarrow. The one you really want to watch out for, though, is on the bottom left. Oops. And that's water hemlock. It grows a lot taller, up to 6 or 7 feet than the yarrow does, but it's super toxic, even to the touch, and it grows. I saw a huge patch of it down at Island View, and it's just something you really want to be careful of, because like I say, if you touch it, it can burn you. And if you ever run into it, if you call parks, they're really good about coming down and noting where it is, and they're really trying hard to eradicate it. And then on the bottom right, not poisonous by any means, but this is Osha. Other people know of this plant as bear root. Also resembles yarrow, but a very sacred medicine, and one that grows up in the mountains that I've always been taught that you need to harvest with an elder and someone who really knows what they're doing, just so we can keep it growing and talk about sustainability. So my favorite plant, I feel like I say that about lots of plants, but I really mean it when I talk about plantain. Plantain was introduced, so it was introduced by the Europeans, and I'm very, very happy that it was. And I think just because it's not a native plant doesn't necessarily mean that it's invasive. Sure, some people might argue with me there. But in my opinion, this is one of the most useful plants out there, and it's also a great, great medicine for the lungs. It contains something called mucilage, which is really a gelatinous substance, and it's called a demulcent. So it's super soothing and coating to your mucous membranes. And like many of the other ones, also an anti-inflammatory. What's so neat about this plant, though, too, is it's very gentle, but it can also be super tough. So its anti-inflammatory actions then turn into an expectorant. So it calms you down, and then it helps you cough up really stuck mucus. So really, really ideal for coughs and irritated bronchial conditions. Again, you can find it on the logging roads, the ditches. A couple of years ago, I dug up a little plant and I started growing this in my own garden, and it's so beautiful. But I highly recommend having this on hand, not only for its properties to dry as a tea for your lungs, but also a great medicine to have if you've got kids around, because I have to give it a little shout out. We were talking about this earlier. I ran into a wasp nest on the weekend, and this little plant actually, I think it actually saved my life. because it's got something in it that draws out venomous bites and infection. So it's really an amazing plant for bee stings, wasp stings, even mosquitoes, for anti-itch. And if you look at it, I've got the broadleaf plantain. There's two different types. So the one on the left is broadleaf, and that's the leaf for that. And the flowers are also very different. But the medicine is the same. And then here is the narrow leaf, I guess is what they call it. Different flowers. But I made a spit poultice. So when Gerry was talking about that earlier, putting the medicine on your skin when it's ready, you just chew up the leaf, and you know, typically this really grows everywhere, but you can just chew it up and get your saliva in it and put that spit poultice right on the sting, and it will almost immediately draw out that venom. So big shout out to plantain. And then mullein. Gerry already talked about mullein, and yes, it is an introduced species as well. It's super abundant in the interior. So if you're ever driving through the interior of the Okanagan, you'll probably see it growing in the big rolling hills. It always reminds me of little mini corn on the cobs. But it's pretty hard to miss. And again, like Gerry was talking about with the doctrine of signatures in the color of the leaves and maybe what that yucky phlegm would look like, is also resemblant in the leaves, because they're covered with these tiny little hairs, very similar to the little hairs that are on the outside of your lungs that act as a filter. So that's a really great indicator for this plant. So it's antitussive, meaning it's a cough suppressant, but as Gerry mentioned, it also helps you cough up phlegm. So it does that until it's successful becoming an expectorant. So funny little medicine, but I love working with mullein. The only thing you have to be really careful about is if you do decide to process this on your own, ironically, those little hairs can be extremely irritating to your throat and your eyes, which I've learned the hard way many times. So I'd recommend once it's dry and you're making it into your tea that you wear a mask and even goggles, because I had the unpleasant experience of inhaling some mullein hairs, and yeah, it just wasn't very fun. So unfortunately, I don't have a sample of the mullein today. And then stinging nettle. Oh, can't forget about this plant, another one of my favorites. And just a shout out to Bianca Elliott, who's one of the hosts here today. She has an amazing YouTube video on stinging nettle that I highly recommend you all watch. But the parts used mainly for the lungs in the nettle is the leaves. Again, it's introduced, but there is some debate about that. I don't know if Bianca has anything to say about that later. But it's an unbelievable plant for so many reasons, and it's one of my favorite lung tonics. And what that means is it's just something that you can use on a daily basis and ongoing to really support your lungs. And again, as Gerry said, a lot of plant medicine and herbal medicine is preventative. So this is one that I highly recommend gathering with gloves probably. And I have it here, and this is kind of an older version of stinging nettle, but I think many are familiar with it. And this one is in flower, but the little hairs that sting you are underneath the leaves and on the stems, and it's filled with formic acid, and that's what gets you. But when the hot water contacts the dried leaf, it just basically breaks all of that down and becomes really usable for tea. So I dry the leaves for tea, but I use this entire plant. You can use the flowers once they get a little bit older, or the seeds when they get a little bit older are super high in omegas and super nutritious. And then the stems can be used as like a plant technology. So for their fiber, and really revered as a rope. My teacher once told me that they have found nettle fishing line or fishing nets in the ocean that was dated over like 1,500 years old. So it's a very awesome plant. I love it. And the roots are also amazing prostate medicine. So pretty much the entire plant you can be used. So super anti-inflammatory as well, and a great antihistamine. But all in all, I love nettle for its nutrition and just using it as a tonic. I think mint is something that everybody is familiar with, and I think you either love it or you hate it. Some gardeners hate it because it's super invasive. I, on the other hand, I can't grow it to save my life, but I have friends who grow it, so I always go over and trade them something for all the nettle I can gather in their gardens. But it's most notable for the menthol that it contains, and it's high in volatile oils. So I love it for the cooling effect that it has on your lungs, and it really decreases that cough reflex. It soothes the dry throat that many smokers also get, and my friend Kim Howe in the interior makes a chew, like a tobacco chew substitute with mint and cayenne pepper that I'm dying to try. Not that I chew, but I still want to try it. That's apparently super effective. So again, just because it's high in the volatile oils, when you're making a tea with mint, you want to make sure you cover it, or any plant with volatile oils, because otherwise they'll just evaporate and you'll lose all of that medicine. My favorite part about mint is the flavor. I call it the salt of the plant world, because when I put it in almost all of my tea blends, and it really marries the flavor of all of the different herbs in your tea blends and just brings them all together. Of course, it's also really well known for just calming stress. And yeah, just again, a super nice flavor for any tea. So while we're on to tea, the plants that I just talked about are the ingredients in this Love Your Lungs tea blend, minus the red clover that you'll see in there. Something just really important to talk about with tea. A lot of people will say, oh, you know, herbal tea, it doesn't do anything for me. But it does. There's just medicinal strengths that you need to learn about. So especially when you're symptomatic, medicinal strength tea is usually about 1 tablespoon of herb per 1 cup of boiling water. And again, really important to keep those volatile oils in, cover your tea, and steep it for a minimum of 20 to 30 minutes. I like to make a super strong tea. After you make it, then of course you have to drink it. And I'd say medicinal dose would be about 3 to 6 cups a day. And that might be hard for some people. Myself, I drink tea absolutely every day. And I think that's why people will drink or make extractions and tinctures, because they're just not going to sit there and have 6 cups of tea a day. But I highly recommend, if you are sick, or even if you just want to support your lungs on a daily basis, just to become an herbal tea drinker. Because it's such a great way and a beautiful way to get that medicine into your system. You can also make it, I can make it today and I can drink it all the way up through the weekend, keep it in the fridge, drink it hot, drink it cold, drink it on ice. But yeah, I love herbal tea, and it's a great way to get that medicine into you. And I'm just going to use my mom voice here because my son's going to talk to you a little bit about steam. So hang on a sec. Hey, Coleman. Oh, you're here. So steaming is another comforting way to get medicine into your system, and it's so nice for kids. They're like tiny little saunas for your lungs, and just a great delivery, very efficient delivery method to get medicine into your sinuses and to your tissues. So I thought, what better way to talk about steaming than from somebody who has experience, and that's Coleman under the towel there. And I'll let him just talk to you a little bit about his steaming experience.
I think the best thing about steaming is that when you're inside, it's really calming because of all of the herbs inside of it. And when you come out, you're like sweating, and it feels really good. And you stop coughing for quite a while. And then later in the evening, you start to cough up like a lot of stuff. And that just helps everything when you're sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Coleman. So I personally use steam all the time. Unfortunately, when I get sick, it goes straight to my lungs. I grew up with a family of smokers, and before they knew about secondhand smoke, I've got chronic bronchitis, unfortunately. So every time I get that really dry cough, I steam, and it's just really important to chop up whatever herb you choose to use, and I'll give you a list of them later. Thyme, like TH thyme, is a really great one to use. Chop it up super fine, you put boiling water over it, just as shown in the picture there, and then you just create like a little sauna for yourself, and you just breathe in really deeply through your nose and out through your mouth. And if you can handle it for about 10 minutes, you could always blow into the bowl too to make the steam come up. And I almost guarantee if you do it often enough, either by that evening or the next day, you will be coughing up a ton of phlegm. I feel like I'm using the word phlegm and mucus a lot today. Sorry. So food is medicine. The final thing I want to share is just there are so many uses or remedies already in your very own kitchen. And I think Bianca will probably touch a lot on these during her immune system presentation in a couple of weeks, but just some of my favorites here. And they're super warming. And like I say, just available everywhere are ginger, oregano, thyme, onions, and sage. A great way to incorporate this every day is just to make essentially a tea, but you make it just a really strong broth and you drink that a couple times a day. You can freeze it. You can also keep it in your fridge. Something a little that breaks up drinking tea all day, I guess. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't speak to COVID at all during this presentation, but just because that would have been a presentation in itself, what I did want to do is share this awesome resource created by Elise Crone, whom I mentioned earlier, and contributing herbalists. And there are several recipes and herbs specific to COVID. What they're learning is the warming herbs really work well and keeping your throat moist with hot water. But it's filled with amazing recipes. And many of the plants we talked about today, she'll go into more detail, and several others, including the culinary herbs. But the host will share this with you after the presentation today. And please feel free to share it with anybody far and wide, your family and your loved ones. Like I say, it's very usable, and yeah, I highly recommend it. So I think that's it. And I think we've got a couple minutes for questions. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Robyn, and thank you, Gerry, for that. Yeah, so it is 1:59, but we don't have to rush. We can definitely take our time with questions. I've seen a few questions come up right now, and I know I have some too. And I just wanted to remind everyone that we do have 2 prize packages that we're giving away. Bianca will put them up on the screen here. And so it's a water bottle, a Cider self-care cube, and a Love Your Lung tea that was made by Robyn. And so how we're going to do it is type in your questions, please, and then me and Robyn or Gerry will pick our 2 favorite questions, and that is how we'll award the prize packages. So just going back up here, I seen one when you were talking about plantain. So you mentioned that it was the leaves, right, that are used. So can you boil it? So you boil it, and then like how much would you use if you're making a tea? And do you have to let it dry first?
Yes.
Okay.
So definitely dry all of your herbs first. You want that chemical reaction and the osmosis to happen, but the leaf here, I've got the drying rack behind me. You can use any kind of screen. But when you're drying herbs, it's best to kind of keep them out of the sun. And a good dried herb should look really similar to how it looks fresh once it's dried. Maybe put a little fan on it if you can. And plantain is something that you can use on its own as a tea, also nice in a blend. So just once it's all dry, it's just really crunchy. There's no moisture left in the leaf. And yeah, I would use the same ratio, about a tablespoon of herb per cup of boiling water. And you can store this in a Ziploc bag or in a jar until it's ready to use. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So someone has nettles infused into apple cider vinegar. Do you know if that would be good for lungs?
Mm-hmm. It definitely would. It's another great kind of extraction, I guess, a way to extract the medicine. Not quite as, you don't get as much medicine out of doing that as you would like an alcohol tincture, but a lot of people don't want to use the alcohol, so you could use like a glycerin or an apple cider vinegar. And yeah, we've made a lot of herbal vinegars. I'm pretty sure there's some recipes in that COVID handout, but it's just the same. You just chop up your herbs super fine and soak it in apple cider vinegar for up to a month. And then you strain that out and squeeze it through a cheesecloth, and that is a super awesome tonic. You could take it daily.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so all the medicines that you talked about today, can all of those be used as steams?
I would typically use something that's high in essential oils. So I'm not going to get into cedar today because cedar can be controversial. A lot of people use cedar and a lot of communities don't. But you do want something that is high in the volatile oils. And I typically, you can use a dried or a fresh plant. I think typically dried would be best. Just important to chop it up super fine and put the boiling water over it. Another thing I didn't mention is you can use essential oils as well, but just be cautious because they're super concentrated. And so maybe 1 or 2 drops of essential oil would be sufficient for a steam, and just make sure it's safe to inhale. And a lot of people at stores where you get them, they'll know that.
Okay, awesome. And so you mentioned a lot too, like you can find some of these in ditches, on logging roads. Is there any places that you would want to avoid harvesting herbs, like high traffic areas? And do you wash them after collecting them?
Okay, so a lot of the herbs, especially nettle and horsetail, there's some that their roots are so deep and it's called like a bioaccumulator. So you do have to be super careful that you're always harvesting from a clean environment. So as much as you know about the location, you don't want to harvest in a dog park because for obvious reasons. But yeah, you always do want to make sure that you know enough about the land and that it's clean and that a gas station maybe wasn't situated on there beforehand. And sorry, what was the second question?
And do you wash them after collecting them, harvesting?
No, I don't. And I mean, it's just the way that I was taught. I always harvest my plants first thing in the morning when they're super fresh. And I can do another workshop on harvesting and drying herbs as well. But yeah, they're very vibrant first thing in the morning, and they're not wet with dew. And I wouldn't harvest also in the rain, because then you're risking that your plant's going to get a little bit moldy. So I wouldn't recommend harvesting or washing my herb. What I do recommend though is laying them outside for a little while after you harvest, because it's not necessarily the dirt that you're worried about, but it's all the little bugs that are probably crawling all over your plant.
Okay. And so someone, if they have a lung condition, serious lung condition, pulmonary hypertension, is it safe to use the Love Your Lungs tea?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's something, obviously, I'm going to have to disclose. It's something you want to connect with your doctor about first. But there's not many contraindications to the herbs that I talked about today, like negative effects to other ailments or other medications. But it is something that I would always consult with either a doctor or maybe a naturopath, because sometimes doctors aren't always on the same side as herbalists, as many of us know. But yeah, for the most part, they're all safe.
Awesome. And so if you are steaming during cold and flu season, is there a recommended amount of time you should be steaming? Like, is there too much?
Well, if you can handle steam for a long period of time, I'd say go for it. Kind of just like when you're in the sauna or just a steam room, but I think the recommendation is about 5 to 10 minutes. And that's also in the handout.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, we have a lot of questions here. Okay, so one person asked, can you eat any, like the herbs that you've mentioned today, can you eat them as a salad, like in a salad?
Well, yes, you can, maybe with the exception of stinging nettle, okay. Which you might want to blanch first. Let me think, I don't know if I would eat yarrow in a salad. It's pretty strong. You can certainly try it. But yeah, none of them, they're all edible technically. But they're not usually, these herbs aren't really known as like the edible wild greens that you would choose for a salad. Many edible uses for stinging nettle, however, but I think that's for another time.
Yeah. And so out of the medicines that you mentioned today, is there any that you would not use together, or can they all be used together?
These ones are all okay to be used together. Yeah, and they complement each other in many different ways.
Okay.
Any questions for Gerry?
There's a lot coming in right now. So, Gerry, there is a couple questions, similar questions about so one Wanda Anderson's she says her father moved from a reserve at a young age and was not involved in a lot of teachings. So how what's the best way to make contact and find a mentor to learn about harvesting medicines?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough question. Mox and telegraph, I guess, is the best. You know, you put the word out, it's like 6 degrees of separation. Mm-hmm. Like you go to a friendship center if you're living in town and say, who knows medicine? Even if the one you ask doesn't know, they'll ask someone else. They keep asking until they find the one. And then that's how you can find the knowledge keeper. Then, of course, when you do meet the knowledge keeper, it's always good protocol to gift the knowledge keeper. You know, on the West Coast, blankets. You know, you get people from the interior or the east of the mountains, it can be tobacco. But I tell people, whatever your spirit guides you to, make sure you gift the knowledge keeper, just like you gift a plant before you pick it.
Awesome, thank you. There's one person here that says, so they're still in the process of learning about traditional plants and medicines and really appreciate learning about the medicinal properties and uses of common plants. And they're wondering if the significance or use of certain plants varies from community to community or nation to nation. And so this person tries not to assume that what is learned or that these medicines might have different meanings and traditional uses compared to where you are.
I believe that there was a network in North America, and we would share knowledge, and we learn, plus trade medicines too. Mm-hmm. You know, like there's a grease trail, for instance, from the West Coast into the interior with Uligan grease, because Uligan grease is a powerful medicine, you know, for the immune system. So I believe that we would trade knowledge too, or we just simply give it, share it with others. But what we use that medicine for, you know, and what are some of the things that can be used with that? And yeah, so that's my belief.
Awesome, thank you. And so I think, you know, we did have a lot of questions, but I think we will just end it here. And I did just want to thank everyone that did send in their questions. And again, too, acknowledging we had at one point when I saw 68 participants just on Zoom. And so that's amazing. Like I'm so amazed that we have been able to kind of like create this amazing network, and to, you know, people were sharing where they were from, and there were some from Ontario and, you know, Vancouver Island. And so I'm amazed at that. And so thank you everyone that joined, and thank you Gerry and Robynne. And we will do this, we have 2 prize packages. I don't know if Robynne, you're able to see the questions here, but I will I'll pick one. So I think the one that really stood out to me was from Wanda Anderson, and she asked about making contact and finding a mentor. And so that's the one I pick.
I feel like this is so unfair. Some of them are so long, but for the sake of time, I'm going to go with the plantain question because that's my favorite.
Okay, the one about I think that was the first one I asked you, if you can boil it. Okay, we'll go with that one. Awesome.
Sorry.
So I'm just gonna write that down, Wanda Anderson and LG. Okay. Awesome. Is there anything else you two would like to share?
Lots of stuff, but no, just thank you so much for having this webinar series. It's so important. I look forward to the next one, and just thanks for having me.
Yes, and I just like to say, because of you doing this, I'm filled with hope, and especially looking at that young fella beside his mother. You know, it just fills me with hope, you know, because a part of me thinks that there are so many that aren't hungry for knowledge or don't grow up around it today. And he's growing up around it. There's a drying rack behind him. It reminds me of my grandmother. I go into her house and there'd be things hanging above the wood stove, you know, and that's how we learn. And I'm just so, it makes my heart good to see your son, Robin. And I'm just so glad that he's not afraid to speak out, you know, so it fills me with hope, you know. So I'm just grateful again for the young ladies and the young man that's doing this project, you know, to get the word out. It doesn't matter how many. What's important is that one person will pick up the teaching and use it and help someone or help themselves. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And I did just want to mention to everyone that we do have a survey. Bianca put it in the chat box here, but we'll put it in again right now because there's been a lot of comments and just, you know, people thanking both of you again, and I can feel everyone's gratitude here, my gratitude as well. And so again, I'm just at this time grateful for this online community, and again, like amazed at the people that were here today. So thank you, everyone. And the people that were winning, that won the prize package, so it was Wanda Anderson and then LGK61. If you could message us on Facebook, we will get those prizes out to you. And yes, thank you. That's it. Bye.
Bye.